Hello. Welcome to the Andy Social Podcast again. Holy shit, you're back. Far out. Thank you very much. My name is Andy, funnily enough, and this episode is not brought to you by Flair. Now, you may be asking, and there may be a few of you that the word does trigger a thought, but what the hell is Flair? Well, Flair, more importantly, 9495 Flair is a card company that released a series of basketball cards that I completely obsessed over back in the 90s, more specifically 94 to 95 NBA season. Now, as a reference point, I have the number one card of that series, which is Stacey Augmon of the Atlanta Hawks. And I've got to admit that these particular cards were quite cool, and they were thicker and had a glossy front and back to them, as opposed to some of the previous cards from the previous seasons where they were still getting away from the whole bubblegum format where it was a bit of a cardboard background with a matty front. I must say with basketball cards, I went through a bit of a fad with them in the 90s, and then I decided to rekindle my love for them a few years ago when I discovered that how worthless they are now and how cheap boxes of these cards were on eBay. It's quite funny because back in the 90s, the NBA in general was quite popular. I mean, Jordan was there, and Michael Jordan, for those people that don't know, he was there, but he had retired in between his 2 3-peat championships. There was just that many personalities in the NBA at that stage that the NBA was just doing so well. And especially in Australia, we had the NBL, the Australian League, was doing really well. We had a lot of magazines, a lot of TV shows and everything that were really pumping the sport, and the cards were just it was a frenzy. There used to be trading card stores, not trading car stores. I guess they're still around. I lived in Rockhampton at the time, at the peak of trading card frenzy, the frenzy that was around at the time. And we used to jump on the bike and ride down to the main street in our suburb, and there was a trading card store there, and it was basically a shitty old storefront, and you go in and there was like a glass cabinet all the way around, and they had all the cards in there in their little clear Perspex hard cases, or the 9 cards Ultra Pro sleeves or whatever, and they all had little price tags on it. And our Bible at the time was a Beckett, and the Beckett was basically an American pricing guide for trading cards. And so you could get an NFL Beckett, you could get an NBA Beckett, you could get one for the baseball and hockey and all that stuff. What we used to do is there would be a number of columns, and I think there was like a retail price, a trade price, and I don't know, something else. And we used to always, I can't remember what column it was, but we used to either double or halve the price. It must have been that we doubled it, I think. So anyway, we'd run our fingers down. You could get the Beckett from the newsagent, and the guys at the trading card store would always have the latest one as well. They came out monthly, and we would go through there, and that would be our indication of what the value of a card was. And this was extremely handy when it came to trading cards between each other, or if we came across a little bit of money, then we could buy some cards, some special inserts or favorite player cards or whatever it might be. Or if we happened to come across a very special rare insert, that we could try and sell it to the card shop and get some money for it, which funnily enough, now thinking back, is such a ridiculous concept, but it worked. And I remember selling a Patrick Ewing, I can't remember what it was, but it was an insert card, and the guy ended up giving me like $12.50 for the card. And I remember having the cash and going, this is amazing. And I ended up using the $12.50 to buy a couple packets of cards with that money, but I thought I was a king. It was amazing. But going back to the value of them and whatnot, and Flair, more importantly, that this episode is not brought to you by, these particular cards were quite expensive to buy in packets. There were fewer cards in a packet. I think standard was usually about 10 to 12 cards in a packet. These were like 8 or something along those lines, and they were more expensive as well. The cards in most cases were valued more than some of the other brands, but they weren't that popular with a lot of people at school and people that I traded cards with, and probably just because they were expensive to buy the packets. But when I went through my resurgence of the love of trading cards a few years back, I did find a box of these cards, and I bought it for something ridiculously cheap, like $30 or whatever. Basically, for those that don't understand, you get a packet of cards. As I said, with this particular series, there was only 8 cards in a pack, and in a box, you would usually have 24 packets of cards in a box. And the box is usually, I think you can still see this at some newsagents with Australian football cards and rugby league cards and whatnot. There's still a lot of those around, but basically the box was almost like its own advertising promotional thing. So the lid would pop up and it would pop out, and there would be an image that pops from the lid, and then you would be able to, the packets would be displayed in the box. So the box would sit on a shelf either at the newsagent or the trading card shop or whatever it might be. And there was always that fascination of, oh man, I wish I had enough money to buy the entire box. And the boxes were usually like minimum of $160 or something like that, going up depending on the brand of card and the value of the cards inside. So when I was sort of collecting them on the first round back in the 90s, I did buy a couple of boxes, which took a lot of saving, and the excitement of opening packets of cards more than what you normally would be used to just felt so wrong, yet so right. It was amazing. It was such a rush, and you'd open a couple of packets that you'd normally be used to, and then you just turn around and realize that you got 22 more packets to open, and it was just the best feeling. You didn't have them all laid out on the carpet, and you're making sure that they're all in order as you go, and blah blah blah. This particular series, 94-95 Flair, I did buy the box, and there was however many packets. I'm assuming 20 to 24 packets that were in there, and I did buy some sleeves to put them all in, and I chucked them all in. And funnily enough, with a lot of these sets, you never get the full set in there anyway. So there's a bunch of cards that are missing, although I'm flicking through it now and it looks like I've got almost everything. There might be 1 or 2 cards there that are missing, which is a bit frustrating, and especially because there's not much of a trading card culture these days with NBA stuff. Maybe in the States there still is, but certainly not in Australia. I know that there's a lot of guys, it's quite funny, within the metal scene in Australia that were massive NBA fans and all have folders and boxes of trading cards sitting around collecting dust. And hey, you never know, there might be a resurgence at some stage where people start to get back into it again. But I've got a ridiculous amount of them, and it's cool to flick through them. I used to remember every single stat in the back. I used to remember how tall everyone was, and you know, how many points per game they used to average, and teams they'd been on. And whenever a new series came out, and then you realize that someone had traded teams, because sometimes, you know, it's not like it is now with the internet where you just, as soon as something happens, it shows up in your news feed. Sometimes you wouldn't know that Chris Webber's changed teams for 6 months, and then it's not until you get the new series of cards that you go through and you go, holy shit, he's playing for the Washington Bullets now. That's amazing. I never had a clue. I thought he was still playing for Golden State. So, you know, this is all extremely interesting, I know. It was exciting to go through this as a kid, and I guess clearly I still get excited about the thought of it. So anyway, this episode is not brought to you, or not brought to me, by 94-95 series Flair, and in particular Stacey Augmon of the Atlanta Hawks. I'm not entirely sure where he ended up, but as of 93-94, he had 3 seasons with the Atlanta Hawks. I can only assume, and this seemed to be a growing trend in the late 90s, and it's obviously, and well, I shouldn't say obviously, because a lot of you people wouldn't even know what the hell I'm talking about. You're probably already turned off by now. But a growing trend, which is still continuing now, is that players continue to change teams willy-nilly, and sometimes for only stay with the team for half a season or for a season at a time. And you might find that even some of these star players will change between 3 or 4 teams before they retire, as opposed to probably, you know, early 90s, late 80s, 70s, where you would stay loyal to one team. And if you did change, it was massive. It was such a huge deal. Now it doesn't really matter as such, because teams themselves, well, it's the mentality that we have with media and everything. Everything's disposable, and we, you know, if something doesn't interest us or doesn't give us results within a short period of time, then we discard it. And it's the same culture within sports and especially the NBA with basketball. I think it's even a case with coaches now. You know, if they're not performing within the first season or within the first couple of seasons and not performing at an extremely high level, then they're discarded, and someone else comes in and tries to do the job. So it's a bit kind of backwards and a bit different to what it used to be. So anyway, Stacey Augmon, no idea what ended up happening to him, but clearly not playing in the NBA anymore because, he started playing in 1991 and, some years have passed. So I'm sure that he's living it up now and doing something. Actually, what I might do in the outro of this podcast is I'll find out exactly, I'll go to Wikipedia and find out what he's done. And I'll give you guys a recap because I'm sure you're all wondering right now and you're trying to go to your Safari or your Internet Explorer or whatever the hell browser you're using to try and search for Stacey Augmon. Don't do it. Don't get distracted. Just wait, listen to this podcast. We'll get to the end and then I'll explain and I'll give you some feedback as to what Stacey's been up to over the years. But once again, not presented by 94, 95 Flair, but I like them all the same. And moving on. All right, let's get down to business. So I mentioned on the last episode that I'm trying to think of a few extra things to fill in the episodes and keep the content going. And I did warn that some of it's probably not really terribly intelligent or has a great deal of substance, but the idea or the thought has made me chuckle, so I thought I'd just give a few ideas a stab. And to be honest, I don't really care. I mean, this is my podcast, so I can do whatever the hell I want. So if you like it, then fantastic. If you don't, well, I don't know, listen to something else. So for this episode, my idea that I've got is Andy's story time. Now, maybe I can cue in some little chimes or something like that to make it sound like a bedtime story. We're going to go through a story from my past. It is 100% true. Over the years, I may have forgotten some details. Not that I'll over-embellish the details, but, for somebody who may be listening who was there with me and some of the details or the sequence of events don't quite match up to what they remember, calm down. The whole point is that the story itself remains the same for the most part. So I'll try and think of a bunch of stupid stories over the years that I've experienced, and as new things happen along the way, I'll add them in as well. I'll have to try and remember what I actually tell you guys and what I don't, so I don't repeat myself and go, oh, did I tell you this story about such and such? And then I realize that I've already told that story 2 times previously, like some old man losing his mind. So anyway, Andy's story time, story number 1. This is the time that I met. Now, I had to be really careful with this, actually. So maybe I need to take a step back. I don't want to name this person because not so much that I want to protect them, but I just think that if I name them, it'll eventually get out one way or the other, and it's just not worth my time. So let's just say several years ago, I was living in St. Peter's in Sydney, in a city suburb, with a couple of people in a share house. And it was great. 2 of us decided to go down to the local pub, or I think we were actually coming back from Newtown after a drinking session on a Sunday, and we were both pretty sauced up by this stage. And we walked into a place called the Town and Country, which is just down the road from our place. So we sort of thought, we'll stop in there on the way back home and just get a beer. So anyway, sit down and we're having a beer, and this guy walks past and sort of dribbles something to us. He's probably in his late 50s, clearly off his face. He's been probably drinking all day, well and truly wasted. And he's going around and he's just giving everyone grief. Not in a malicious or bad way, just the drunken, annoying guy that's just happy-go-lucky and just wants to have a chat to everyone. And because we'd had quite a few drinks, we just thought it was amusing. So anyway, he sort of dribbles some crap to us and keeps walking around. But eventually he decides he wants to come back and start, trying to have a conversation with us, which was a bit challenging to start off with. But then he began to get on a bit of a roll. So funnily enough, the conversation was all about women. And this guy thinks he's a bit of a Casanova and talks about all these young girls that he picks up and takes back to his place, and he starts going through and explaining all the things that he does to them, and multiple girls and blah blah. And we're both drunk and we think it's funny that this guy is just carrying on. So we're fueling the fire by giving him acknowledgement and laughing at his crazy wacky stories and whatnot. Now, very interesting point to add in here is that this particular gentleman is a relative of a very famous Australian boxer. Now, there's not a lot of really famous Australian boxers. So you could probably narrow it down, and given the location of this pub, maybe someone may draw the line in. But anyway, I won't go any further than that. This person was a relative of a very, very famous Australian boxer, which he made sure that everybody knew, and the locals appeared to know this guy quite well. So this must be moving forward quite a bit. We find out this is definitely his local, but I'll explain that a bit more later on. So he's carrying on. He's telling us about all his escapades and all these different things that he's doing. We're laughing at him and we're swigging beers and cheersing and thinking everything's hilarious and blah, blah. And then eventually, this is where it gets a bit hazy at this point, but things start to sober up very quickly. But either the pub was about to shut or the bar was shutting, or there was just a decision to hightail it. Now, I've got a feeling it was more a decision to hightail it at that stage because it was still reasonably early. So I'm guessing, look, off the top of my head, I'm just having a punt that potentially it was probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. So anyway, he says to us, you should come back to my place and have some beers at my place. I've got beers and we can have a few cones. And for those that aren't that way inclined, cones basically means we smoke some marijuana and you can have a look at all my homemade porn. Now, sober Andy would have gone, nah, it's all right, mate, all good. Sounds like fun, but no, we'll give it a miss. Drunk Andy with my drunk mate, who I won't name, but everyone who knows me will know who this person is, we jumped at it and went, sounds like a plan. So off we trod, and we're getting up to leave, and the bar guy goes, oh, you guys are going? And we said, yeah, we're going back to such and such's place, and we're going to, have some beers and whatever. And he laughed and said, watch out, guys. And we sort of looked at him in our drunken haze and sort of went like, what does that mean? And he laughed and said, don't worry about it, he's harmless. Now, sober Andy would have taken that on board as a red alert. Drunken Andy pretty much took his word for it and said, he's harmless and it's all a bit of a joke and a bit of fun. So anyway, off we trod. And because I think even if I was drunk and I was by myself, I wouldn't have got this far. But because I was with my mate, I think you tend to think you're a bit invincible and that you're completely safe, which is a bit stupid to think. But at the time, we thought that everything was fine. It was a bit of a laugh. Apparently, this guy just lived around the corner, and we'd just go and sink a few beers and then stumble home afterwards. So anyway, off we go. He leads the way, and sure enough, he lives probably a street or two behind the pub in our sort of general direction of our home, which is several blocks up the road. So anyway, we get there, nice place, and we go in and gets us a can of the good stuff, the very best can of VB. And so anyway, we're sipping on that, and he's like, oh yeah, come in here, and shows us, walks past a little hallway, not a living room, but like just a little, I don't even know what it was, like a little alcove or something in the hallway. And it had all the belts of his relatives' endeavours as a boxer. As I said before, he's related to a very famous Australian boxer. So he had a couple of, I don't know jack shit about boxing, but it looked like a championship belt. There was a big picture of this guy, and there was a few trophies and things like that, which was really kind of weird because I didn't understand why he would have it all and the boxer wouldn't. But hey, I was drunk, and I wasn't really sort of paying a lot of attention at that point in time. But anyway, he acknowledged it and showed us, and we were like, oh yeah. It was almost like a bit of a reassurance for us that we were in the hands of someone noble and someone socially socially acceptable and socially responsible. So we've got our cans of VB, and he takes us into a walk-in wardrobe, and like a fairly large walk-in wardrobe, or looked like it anyway. It was probably just a closet. And he had his computer in there, and he starts showing us pictures of all the women that he's brought back home. And the mind can wander, and you can assume what sort of pictures they were. But there was quite a bit in there where he was extremely proud and excited about the various images and various poses and different file formats that he had. And this is not just like a folder. I would envision that he had gigabytes full of photos and videos. And I'm not talking from like one or two women, lots and lots and lots of women. Now, bit hazy. So, I can only remember what I can remember, but there was more than a couple. There was quite a lot of women that were in these photos. And look, nothing alarming in the sense that it looked like they were clearly enjoying themselves and having a great time as well. So there was nothing there that sort of made me think, oh, geez, were these women here on their own free will or anything like that. There was nothing there to make me think otherwise. Moving along, he's showing us, he's clicking through the pictures and the videos he's showing us, hey, this is funny, and we're like, oh, hilarious. We're starting to think this is a little bit odd, but hey, we've got a beer and we're pretty plastered, so we sort of just let it slide and just go, this is all right, whatever. He gets a bit tired of that. He goes, don't worry about that. All right, come into the other room, I'll show you some other stuff. And we're like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, cool. Still, for the most part, completely oblivious to whatever the hell's going on because we were a bunch of dickheads. And he takes us into his bedroom. Yes, I know. Why? Don't know. There's a perfectly good lounge room out there that we could have just sat on the freaking couch and just watched TV and had a chinwag or whatever. But no, great idea. Let's walk into his bedroom. So we walk into his bedroom and he's got a wall-mounted TV with a camcorder, sort of 90s video camcorder hooked up next to the TV that's plugged into the TV. That's all sitting on this little wall-mounted shelf or whatever coming out of the wall or out of the ceiling or whatever it is. And he's like, yeah, sit down. And so we sit down and he turns the TV on, turns the camcorder on, and there's a video in there and he goes, this was from 2 nights ago. Check this out. And it's him in that room with 2 girls considerably younger than him having what appears to be a reasonable time. And he's like, hey, check this part out. You can see my dick and blah, blah. And here's this close-up shot of his dick hitting the chick and blah, blah. And that's about as much detail as I'm going to give. But he seemed to be quite proud of it. And I didn't realize at the time, but I guess in thinking back now, I didn't really acknowledge or realize or even question who did the zooming in on that camera. There was no inkling that there was anybody else there, but yet somebody was maneuvering that camera. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. But I didn't really think about it at the time. Not that I didn't really think about it, I just did not think about it. And so at this point, we're getting a little bit more awkward, but we still think it's pretty funny, a bit disgusting because we really didn't want to see his dick. But sure enough, it's all happening on the screen in front of us. So anyway, we're sitting there with their VBs on the bed, on the edge of the bed, and we're all having a laugh. He's sort of sitting a bit behind us, back on the bed, and my mate and I are sitting on the edge of the bed, watching and drinking, and sort of just, I guess, politely laughing in a way. And he's telling us stories and blah blah. And look, really nice guy without the whole situation of the smut level involved. You wouldn't really think this guy's of any worry whatsoever, really. I mean, even with the smut level, it didn't appear to be of anything of alarm. But anyway, he's plastered. We're on our way there. He was well and truly more than gone than what we were. He was far drunker than what we were, which I still want to make sure that everyone's aware that we certainly had a few drinks. No excuse, though, in hindsight. But anyway, we're sitting there and there's a knock at the front door. And this guy goes, oh, God, hang on a sec. Just bear with me a moment. I'll be back in a sec. So remember this, we left about 6:37. I'd say it's probably about 7:30 now. Yeah, roughly around that time. And so we're sitting there and I sort of turn to my friend and say, from what I can remember, something along the lines of, hey, we probably should go soon. And he looked at his watch or whatever and said, oh, yeah, good call. It was a mixture of, we should get the fuck out of here. This is a bit weird. And I think more of a case at that point that we got to work the next day. We better leave soon. We don't want to get this any messier than what it is. So ridiculous. But hey, I guess at least we're trying to be responsible. So anyway, we're sitting there, and this guy comes back in, and he's walking back in with another guy. Now, this other guy is, I don't know, his mate, whatever. I got no idea. But this guy, well, for starters, his level of intoxication is double what this other guy is. He is on another fucking planet. This guy is just, I'm surprised this guy even knows where he is, let alone is standing. Now, I don't know if he can see how many people are in the room. I don't know if he can see who's who or what's what. He's that glazed over and that off his face is just not funny. But I guess maybe to make it funny, He happens to be wearing a cowboy hat and a flannelette t-shirt and is more or less dressed like somebody that would live in Texas. Can't really string a word together or string a sentence together, let alone just getting a single word out of his mouth. But anyway, our mate goes and gets him a can of VB. He seems to be appreciative of it. Seems to be, regardless of his high level of intoxication, is relatively polite and seems to be okay. He's not aggressive. He's not looking to be volatile in any way. He seems to be, I wouldn't say jolly, but, happy enough actually not even happy, just content with the situation and his surroundings and the fact that he's got a beer in his hand. So anyway, my mate gets up. Because I can't name names, I'm sorry if I get everybody confused with who's who. But my mate that I live with sat up and moved behind me on the bed. And this guy, who might I add is very heavy-set, large guy, not clinically obese, but a big guy, sits at the end of the bed next to me. Then my mate's sitting behind me, and our mate, this guy who owns the house, is sitting behind Mr. Cowboy, behind him on the bed, and next to my friend, my mate, if that all makes sense. So just to paint the picture a bit more, I'm sitting on the front or left-hand corner of the bed, facing the bed, and Mr. Cowboy is sitting next to me on the foot of the bed, and then behind me is my mate, and behind the cowboy, Mr. Cowboy, is our gentleman in question who owns the home. So we all go back to what we were doing. We look up. We're watching the entertainment on the TV, chuckling. Yeah, it's hilarious, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how long it was. I can't imagine it was long. It is a bit hazy. But Mr. Cowboy starts to move his hand across the bed towards my leg. Now, he doesn't quite get to my leg, but close enough where he's on the verge of making contact. Now, he's doing it in a way that initially I thought he was just trying to get his balance because he was that off his face. But then when I sort of managed to focus my attention on what was going on, I clearly see that he was intentionally moving his hands towards me. Now, a side note that I'm thinking back on the whole thing, I can't remember if I had my hair out or not. And whether his level of intoxication thought that I was a chick or otherwise. But either way, it was happening. Now, at this stage, if the alarm bells weren't already ringing, they were certainly ringing now. And I quickly moved right to the edge of the bed, away from his hand. I didn't jump up, which is a bit alarming and a bit concerning and really a bit disappointing in myself that I didn't react a bit more urgently to what appeared to be happening. But I moved to the end of the bed and turned around to my mate and looked at him. Now, at the same time this is all happening, our mate, who owns the place, is telling my mate to lean back onto the pillows of the bed and says, "Hey, mate, just relax. Yeah, lie back. It's all good. Yeah, relax. Hey, don't worry about it. All good. That conversation's happening while Mr. Cowboy is moving his hand towards my leg. So all in a matter of half a second or whatever it is, I move to the edge of the bed, I look around at my mate, and we make eye contact. Now, from what I can remembering that we're both pretty intoxicated, my mate had a look on his face that was a little bit uneasy, but half relaxed and sort of still partially enjoying himself in the sense that this is pretty wacky and pretty crazy and how the hell did we get here, etc., etc. And keeping in mind that this guy is related to this famous boxer. So there's that novelty there that's part of the reason why I think we even went to this guy's place in the first place. And I think it sort of gave us a bit of peace of mind that we thought we'd be okay, which is just ridiculous anyway. We shouldn't base it off someone's, well, it's not even his status, it's, a status by association. So he's got this look on his face, but then we make eye contact, we lock in. And at that moment, at least for me, but it appeared that my mate also had the same thought, and we instantly sobered up. We instantly just looked at each other, and whatever haze was in our eyes had just cleared. And we just looked at each other and the pupils sort of, extended, and we just looked at each other and eyes opened up, and it was almost this thought or this consciousness that came over both of us at that time where we knew we needed to leave. And so we both, now, exactly what happened then, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm pretty sure we both got up pretty quickly and said, we've got to go. Look at the time. We've got to work in the morning, et cetera, blah, blah. And he's like, nah, stay. We'll punch a few cones and I've got more beer in the fridge, blah, blah. And by this stage, Mr. Cowboy that's on the bed who was trying to push his hand towards my leg I think he just started staring at the wall. So he's got no freaking idea what's going on. He's just off with the fairies. And we're like, no. And we're trying to be polite and still jokingly, blah, blah, but we're in a little bit of a state of panic, wanting to get the fuck out of this place. And we managed to say, no, look, we appreciate it. We'll be back. We'll come back. Yeah, it would be great to catch up again. We'll have some more beers. And he's like, yeah, that sounds great. This guy's in his late 50s and he's drunk off his face and whatever. That's my impression of him, by the way. And so we leave Mr. Cowboy in the bedroom, sort of staring at the wall, the ceiling, or whatever he was doing, and who's about to pass out. So we go to walk out of this guy's home. So we're walking down the hallway and we get to the front door and we walk out into the little porch and there's a little front gate there and we go to stand up there and he dives in front of us to open the gate or something. And so we're having, the polite chinwag before you part ways. And I can't remember what the hell we're talking about, but he's carrying on about something. And then as he's talking, and remember, he's in between us and the gate. So we're standing closer to the house than he is, but we're trying to leave it, but he's standing in front of us. And so he's talking to us about God knows what, probably just telling us to come back again next Sunday or come back during the week or whenever, or come back down to the pub or whatever. But at the same time, he stands there and he undoes his fly and he gets his dick out. Now, as a sequence of events, because this all happens pretty quickly and we're trying to get out of there, we are panicked, but we are trying to be polite. We are intoxicated. So we've got all these mental challenges that we're trying to navigate and trying to work out. So we've got all that in our mind. The guy who is the source or the main source of our worries, let alone Mr. Cowboy back inside, is blocking our exit, not in a malicious way, but he's still blocking it, and it's causing a little bit of stress. And then on top of it, he's unzipping his fly and getting his dick out. Now, what happens next is that he doesn't hesitate, he doesn't stop, he continues to talk, and when he gets his dick out, he just starts pissing on the ground, on the pavement, right in front of us. Like just peeing on the ground while he's talking to us. He's got his dick in his hand, his other hand's got his can of VB, and he's talking to us about God knows what, about coming back and how great it was and blah, blah, and we'll come back and have a few cones and whatever. And he's got his dick out, he's pissing all over the floor. Luckily not on us, but he's pissing all over the place. So he manages to finish, because to be honest, how do you navigate around that? He's pretty much blocking the path. I can't exactly try to walk towards him to get around him when he's got his dick out, let alone pissing all over the floor. So we kind of have to wait for him to finish pissing, which luckily he doesn't need to piss that long. And then he puts himself away, does his fly up, and then he goes to shake our hands. And I don't know about my mate, but I just instinct, the hand went out and I went to shake his hand and I shook his hand after he just had his dick in his hand. And we said our goodbyes again and we slowly, casually walked off down the street and gradually began to pick up the pace. We got to the corner and then started piss bolting towards home. Now, the funny thing by this stage, I would say it's probably 8 o'clock. Now, because it's a Sunday night, this particular pub that we were originally at shuts early. It's Sunday night. I don't think it's as bad as what it used to be, but we'd shut early on a Sunday. And we're going past and we're moving pretty quickly. And the bar guy is closing up the pub and he's like pulling some stuff in from outside, or he's closing the windows or whatever, I can't remember. But he sees us and he yells out something along the lines of, "I hope you guys are going home to get disinfected." And all I can remember is laughing, going, "You fucking knew." And he just laughed and we just kept running and we ran all the way home. And I just remember both of us saying to each other, whatever you do, don't touch anything. Don't put your hands near anything. Don't put anything near your face. Don't touch anything. Just get home and wash the hell out of your hands and scrub your body head to toe. And that was our Sunday night many years ago. And this particular guy gave us his business card for us to clearly get in contact with him and call him on his mobile. And I'm pretty sure I've got it lying around somewhere. I probably should have pulled it out just so I had something to refer to. But as I said, I think it's probably in everyone's best interest to not say who it was. For the mates that are close to me, they all know who I'm talking about, or at least who the famous boxer was. But I think it's for the best that we keep those names pretty quiet. But it was certainly an interesting experience, a little bit frightening and disturbing at the time. The next day, thinking about it, or even that night, but probably more so the next day when I'd sobered up, there was definitely an element of disappointment in myself that I allowed myself to get into that situation in the first place, because it was some very poor life choices, and the outcome of this whole scenario could have gone in a completely different direction and a far more negative outcome than what ended up happening. So I was disappointed in the sense that I was a little bit reckless and a bit silly. However, when you're looking at the silver lining of it, it does make a pretty good story, and it is quite funny thinking back of it now, and especially telling people now. It always gets a few laughs, especially when they get a few extra details along the way. But we ever since then never seen that guy again. Apart from, I remember driving past the pub several months later, I assume, and he was standing out the front having a cigarette, and it looked like he eyeballed me as I drove past, but not an acknowledgement as such, but we, for a split second, locked eyes, and that was enough to really send a chill down my spine. I never went back to that pub again. To be honest, that pub was pretty crap, and whenever I drive past it now, I'm reminded of that chilling night. And to be honest, that pub has never really improved as far as aesthetics and whatnot. It just seems to be a bit of a dive. There's far better places to drink in that part of Sydney. But nonetheless, it was quite an eventful night, and in hindsight, a pretty funny story. But yeah, stay tuned for story number 2. Look, to be honest, I probably shot myself in the foot because I don't think I can really top that story. The other stories that I've got in the back of my mind probably are a little bit shorter and not as chilling as this one was, but should still be amusing. So stay tuned for Andy's story time, story number 2, or whatever the hell I'm going to call this thing. It won't be the next episode, but it'll be a few episodes in the future anyway. And we'll keep this going because there's quite a few there that I'll continue to touch on as we go. But I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure that you were white-knuckled at the end of your seat listening to my elite storytelling skills, and obviously a very entertaining story, and something that you'll definitely be telling your children or your grandchildren or your partner or your mother. And I'm sure that they'll all be extremely impressed by this story that you tell them. So no need to thank me. I do what I can, and it's just my way of giving back to the community. Cool. Thanks for listening. I know that everyone just could not maintain attention throughout that entire episode because you're all wondering what the hell Stacey Augman's been up to over the years since the 94-95 season, which was depicted on the Flair NBA trading card that this episode is not brought to you or to me by. So I've pulled up the Wikipedia page for Stacey, and I'm just going to flick through. Funnily enough, he's actually aged 47 right now, born August 1st. Also, he's just recently had his birthday in 1968. So as we said before, clearly not playing in the NBA anymore. Usual age or average age of retirement is around the 36, 37 mark. A couple of people make it to 40, but for the most part, that's about it. So funnily enough, I predicted correct. So until 1996, he stayed with the Atlanta Hawks. After that, he had a season with the Detroit Pistons. Awesome stuttering. And then from 1997 to 2001, he was with the Portland Trailblazers. So that's actually quite a period of time. Then in 2001 to 2004, he moved to the Charlotte Hornets, which changed their name, relocated to New Orleans during that time. And then he, from 2004 to 2006, played with the Orlando Magic, where he subsequently retired. And then, which I didn't know, and this is quite interesting, from 2007, so straight away, following season, well, I'm assuming, until 2011, he was the assistant coach for the Denver Nuggets. So there you go. Career highlights and awards. He was an NBA All-Rookie First Team, which is pretty good for that year. And no other NBA highlights or awards from there. He had a few college awards, but that stuff's boring anyway. Sorry, Stacey. What else have we got here? Now, as with a lot of players from the NBA, there's always some controversy around what they got up to while they're in the league or what they got up to afterwards. Usually there's something pretty saucy. Funnily enough, for Stacey Augmon, he definitely falls into this particular scenario. So, as per the entry from Wikipedia, during the 2004-2005 season, which was with the Orlando Magic, so this is getting close to him retiring, Augmon was investigated by the league for 2 incidents. He had already refused to speak to the media, which violated league rules. So that's no biggie. That's not too hardcore there. It's more or less just him being, a bit antisocial or antisocial. The first was following a game on March 11, 2005, where Greg Sandoval from the Washington Post wrote, as reporters gathered around the locker of Magic guard Jameer Nelson, a female reporter for a local TV station kneeled down to give the cameraman a clear shot and to place a microphone near Nelson, who was sitting down. Augmon, whose locker is near Nelson's, made a comment about the woman being on her knees in front of a player that involved a reference to oral sex, a witness told the newspaper. Ooh, shit. Not a good thing to do. 2 nights later, on March 13th, Sandoval continues. Augmon became angered over a question that Orlando Sentinel reporter asked Magic guard Steve Francis. So by the sounds of this, just to go off track a little bit, Stacey Augmon likes to get in other people's business as a bit of a nosy body. So clearly this guy needs to just shut the fuck up and mind his own business. So I'm actually a little bit disappointed that I've even highlighted this guy in my podcast, but we'll continue anyway. Augmon, that's a stupid expletive question, Augmon allegedly said, according to several reports. When a male Florida Today reporter told Augmon that they were interviewing Francis and not him, good call, Augmon shouted obscenities and began moving towards the reporter. So obviously Augmon can't handle any form of criticism or any sort of trash talking or anything of the sort. So this guy sounds like a bit of a hothead. A Magic employee stepped in front of Augmon, who then threw a bottle of lotion at the reporter. The bottle did not strike the reporter, but some of its contents splashed his clothes. So not terribly saucy as opposed to some of the other players from the 90s, but nonetheless someone who clearly thinks he's better than everybody else and needs to get involved in other people's business. So sounds like a bit of a fuckwit, really. But hey, that was back in 2005. That's 10 years ago. Maybe he's calmed down a bit and is a nice guy now. Who knows? But you know what? I might actually highlight some NBA players in my further podcast episodes for a bit of a laugh, especially some of these old chestnuts from the 90s. As I said, a lot of them have some pretty colourful incidents throughout their playing career and even afterwards. Sean Kemp, anybody? You can have a look at that guy, but maybe I'll put him on the next podcast or in a few podcasts' time and reference him because I think he's a good laugh, that one. But yeah, anyway, there you go. So for those people that have been holding on white-knuckled to find out the outcome of Stacey Augmon, there's a bit of information for you. You can all rest with some peace of mind now and not fret about having that story left open-ended. So great result all.